For me, because I can, I'm looking directly at my iPad, so I'm not seeing anybody, but I trust that you're actually out there. I'm here today to talk about, a initiative that I've started up called the Michael James Jackson Foundation for Brewing and Distilling, and where it comes from. And I think if I recall correctly, I named this talk, if you want to give it a name, cause and effect. And I'll take you back to the beginning of where this has all come from. First of all, the Michael James Jackson Foundation for Brewing and Distilling, the purpose of the organization is to fund, through scholarship awards, technical education in brewing and distilling for people of color, who are either already in the industry or who are wishing to enter the industry. Now, a couple of weeks ago, there was an article in the New York Times that pointed out all of the things that various African Americans, Black people, in the United States are doing, especially Black brewers, to try to benefit other Black brewers and people of color and bring them into the industry. And what was very interesting to me was to read the comments. And you can do the same if you want to look up that article in the New York Times. If you put in Black brewers, I'm sure it'll be the first thing that comes up. And if you read the comments, most of the comments, at least for the first few days, and I didn't really go back to them after that, were along the lines of, why does everything have to be about race? Everybody likes, good beer. Can't we just leave it at that? Or along the lines of, well, maybe Black people aren't involved in brewing because they're not interested in beer, or they don't like craft beer, or. Depending upon your point of view, most of the comments were in some way, shape, or form, pretty racist. And this was the New York Times. So I think that we should go back first to the beginning for me, in this process, and then a bit further back in history. So let's go back 5 years now. I get a phone call from a writer for Thrillist, the online magazine. I am in Slovenia at the time, in the vineyards, checking out Slovenian wines. And the reporter has a question, which is, why are there almost no Black brewers in the United States? Does craft beer in particular have a racism problem? Now, I have to admit that although he was a very nice guy and I knew that his heart was in the right place, I told him that I wasn't going to talk to him for his article, because I said to him, first of all, have you noticed the country that you live in? Have you noticed that when you go to a nice restaurant, there are no Black people in the restaurant? They are not there as servers. They are not there as bartenders. They are not there as customers. They are not there working on the cooking line. If you find any, you will find them as porters or as dishwashers. I don't have to ask whether or not this is the case, because it is the case almost everywhere in the United States. I said, have you noticed that at your magazine, I don't have to come to your newsroom to know that you don't have any Black reporters? And so we do live, whether we want to face the fact or not, relatively separate existences in the United States, which have given rise to all kinds of problems. Now, the question that many people asked is, if there are not African Americans brewing beer in the United States, is that actually a problem? Like, whose problem is it? So let me point out that he went on, this reporter, to write his article in which he mentioned that I would not speak to him. I told him to go read Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, Between the World and Me, was a bestseller at the time. I said, go read that. And then when you come back, you can ask a real question, which is what's going on, in the United States when it comes to African Americans going into, any profession, almost that you wish to name. That article, by the way, which entirely missed the point, won the James Beard Award that year for article writing. So you can go read that too. Recently on Twitter, we had a denouement over the whole thing, and he talked about how he managed to miss the point 5 years ago, and how glad he was to re-engage that now, and I think that was a great thing. Let's look at how we have ended up where we have. First of all, people looking at things, say, like this, think of beer as a European thing. First of all, this is not true. This has never been true. Every single African society, north to south, east to west, unless they have recently, in the last several hundred years, become particularly Islamic, have a very strong native brewing tradition, which became part of brewing traditions later in the United States. These beers are made of everything from barley to millet to triticale to sorghum to fonio, but they tend to be the center of village life in almost every African village, whether it's Umkomboti in South Africa to Bilbil, to all sorts of beers. So brewing is quite native, not only to Africa, but to a great many countries. Just because we are mostly familiar with the European expression of brewing does not mean that this doesn't have deep roots in many cultures. Secondly, before the Civil War, at least, almost all the brewing in the United States was done by Black people. This may not, be something that ever occurred to you, but, since most of the work in the United States was in fact done by African Americans, I'm talking about physical labor. In a lot of breweries, they were the main people who were doing it. And in fact, when we read about the founding fathers having brewed their own beer, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, George Washington, we have their letters, we have their recipes, only they're not their letters and they're not their recipes. Well, they are their letters, but when they say that we brewed something, oh, we just brewed something, I just brewed something, the I in that case is not them. It's an enslaved person who is actually doing the brewing. So beer, brewing, etc., long roots, both out of Africa and from the early United States in brewing. However, when it became a job that people could go out and get, it turned out that African Americans were excluded. And I'm using African Americans in this case as a stand-in for people of color in general. This includes Latinos, Asians, whoever else you would like to speak to. So here is people say, well, you're not being excluded from anything. You could go to beer bars, you could apply for a job at a brewery. There are many ways to go into this. So I want you to reverse, if you are a European American, I would like you to reverse the situation for you, for yourself, for a minute, from a cultural point of view. If you are an aficionado of craft beer, or of natural wine, or of great cocktails, just suppose, every time you wanted to interact with that culture, every time you wanted to have a great craft beer in a beer bar, or a great cocktail in a great cocktail bar, when you went to that place, everyone in there was Black. Every time. There was nobody in there who looked like you, no customers, nobody behind the bar, etc. How would you feel about that? Now, you might say to yourself, well, I'd be fine. Like I'm a good liberal person. I'm used to hanging out with all kinds of people, but really, absolutely fine every time, because that's the world that African Americans live in. Guess what? When we go to the cocktail bar, the natural wine bar, you know, the beer bar, we are the only ones there. And guess what? It's weird. It's weird, and it keeps people from engaging with this culture. So that's number one, because this gets back to what every brewery wants, which is sales. You know, why do people of color interact with the culture less than everybody else? Well, when you don't see yourself in the culture, you have a tendency to back off. Now we can talk about, you know, what really goes on, the nitty gritty. How do people get jobs? They might go to LinkedIn, they go up on job boards, they are recommended for jobs by their friends. And that last part is important, connections, which it turns out that many people of color do not have into the craft beer community for the aforementioned reasons. So, hey, you know, you should talk to my friend Bob. You know, he's been doing this and this. He's a car mechanic, but you know, he'd be great on the bottling line. That is not the kind of connection that most people of color are going to have. Now, if you get to my level, let me, you know, make a confession, if you like. I have had, you know, in my long brewing career, 30 years as a sitting brewmaster in professional breweries, I have had no African American applicants for any brewing job ever. None. I have sent Gambians to brewing school. I have sent Iraqis to brewing school. I have sent European Americans to brewing school. We have had refugee programs that we work with, and we're very proud of that, providing jobs for refugees from all sorts of countries. We had more than a dozen countries represented in our brew house at one point, and it looked diverse. Different colored people who speak different languages. We were like, this is awesome. It didn't occur to me, really, to tell you the truth, that there is no refugee program for African Americans. We're from here. And so, you know, the pathway to get into the brewery, while it looked open, was actually blocked. And who blocked it? I did. So let's look at how you end up with a racist result, even if you are not yourself a racist. Okay, Brooklyn Brewery is an international brand. We are in 35 countries. We actually sell slightly more beer outside the United States than in the United States. The number 2 market for Brooklyn beer outside of the New York area is Sweden, followed by France, the UK, you know, etc. Very big markets for us. We are serious. Our brew house operates like a Michelin star restaurant. There is no room for amateurs at Brooklyn Brewery. This is not a brew pub, and no disrespect for brew pubs. They're awesome. And in a brew pub, it's quite possible that you can start as a dishwasher or a barback or a bartender and work your way up, you know, into the brew house. This can't really happen at Brooklyn Brewery any more than you can end up in the kitchen at 11 Madison Park as somebody who was, you know, doing another job in there. You probably came out of a cooking school or another serious restaurant. So what am I requiring if I am to hire a brewer? I need either 2 to 3 years of experience, or I need equivalent coursework from an accredited institution. These are legitimate needs. If you mess up in a serious brewery, you don't burn a piece of fish in the restaurant on Saturday night. You kill somebody, or you maybe ruin a $75,000 or $100,000 tank of beer. No one can afford any of this. So we need serious people with serious training. So let's look at what that ends up to actually mean. Okay, I require 2 to 3 years of experience. Fewer than 1% of people in brew houses in the United States are African American. I don't think that the numbers are very different for Latinos, nor for Asians, nor for anybody else. Very, very tiny numbers. 2 to 3 years of experience. Most breweries in the United States, the majority of them, more than half, are less than 4 years old. So there are actually a tiny pool of people from these different backgrounds who actually have 2 to 3 years of experience. Okay, I will also accept equivalent coursework. Now let's look at finances. In the United States, African Americans have 10% of the assets of European Americans on average. 10%. Meaning that, you know, European Americans have 10 times more assets than we do as a group. That's not income, but that's the money you can count on. It is equity in a home, something to back you up. We also, our families, etc., we do not have the assets around us. We don't know anybody with the assets, which means let's look at the courses. Okay, Master Brewers Association short course, 2 weeks, packaging, brewing, etc., $3,000. Very good course, cost $3,000. UC Davis Master Brewers course, $16,000. American Brewers Guild out of Vermont. I've probably hired about a dozen brewers out of that program. Great program, $9,000. Do you get the picture? So you have very expensive education. You have people who have 10% of the assets to work with, or you are requiring experience that almost nobody has. And therefore, how would a person of color ever end up in my brew house? So, you know, that is a good example of a thing which was not intended to be racist and was not racist, you know, from my point of view, but because of systemic problems, ends up having a racist result. And this is what we talk about when we talk about systemic racism. Systemic racism isn't a feeling, it's a result. You know, and if you are actually excluding people, then the result is in of itself racist. Therefore, what you need to do is something which is anti-racist. It needs to push back in the other direction to level the playing field in some way so that people who have the qualifications that you need actually have an opportunity to enter the system. And this is where the Michael Jackson Foundation, you know, comes in. The MJF is going to essentially manufacture, and I use this word not so lightly, it's not a nice sounding word, but you know, it's appropriate, manufacture the sorts of applicants that we need to see. So if you have a person possibly who did work their way up from being dishwasher at a brew pub, they've been taught how to brew, but they're probably brewing by rote. Take this much grain, mix it with this much water at this temperature, wait for an hour, start to run it off, spray the water down on top. The instructions, this is how you do it. And maybe they've gotten good at it. But when you go to that person and you say, okay, we need the beer to be drier. We need the beer to be sweeter. We need the beer to be about 20% more bitter. We would like a more floral hop aroma. We would like if it had undertones of banana. That brewer will not know how to achieve any of these things. And therefore, what he or she has is not a career, but a job. And a job where there is no real future to it. There is no opportunity to move up unless someone is going to teach you something new. And you do not have the technical background necessary to actually make this into a high-paying, flourishing career. This is where the MJF comes in. By taking a person of that sort and sending them to a brewing course, they would have to apply and get into the brewing course, but we would provide the financial wherewithal, which would be paid to the educational institution, to pay for that course. Say the course is the ABG course at $9,000. That person then comes back from that course being much, much more confident, knowing things that they never were likely to figure out or find out by themselves. with new skills that are very valuable, not only to themselves, but also to the company with which they work. And that person will get a job. They will get a job. If they want to move up into a new job, they will be able to find a new job that's going to pay more than their old job. In short, that person now has a career where before they had a job. And then beyond that, when we get a bit further into it, you'll be able to have somebody who is working as an accountant and she's doing a great job as an accountant, but she is not loving that job. She's a home brewer. She's always wanted to brew professionally. She wants to engage with it, but there's no way in. And she doesn't know anybody who's going to bring her in the door. And then we can start accepting people who have that sort of background and take them up to the next level where they can be entry-level brewers. Aside from, the piece which is financial, which is paying for the brewing education, we also will have a mentoring program that sits side by side with our scholarship awards. So when you win the MJF scholarships, whether that is the Jeff Palmer Award for brewing or the Nearest Green Award for distilling, this will come with a mentor who will be assigned to you. This will be a person of color who is within the industries, who will be able to provide you with advice, take your emails, provide you with connections, and basically smooth your path into the industry and through the industry and take an active interest in your success, which is something which not many people of color have in any area of life, never mind our industries. This is very important. We know from higher education that there are many people who may get into a university and then get there and find that they are culturally excluded. They are unfamiliar with almost everything going on a day-to-day basis except for the actual coursework. And therefore, they don't have the same experience that other students have. And by having a mentor, somewhere to go, a student organization, something, this provides a both cultural, emotional, and resource lifeline, that lots of people may need. People come from different backgrounds. And even though people may look the same and come in some way from a similar cultural background, socioeconomically, et cetera, things may be really quite different. And so, we need to hold people up, in those ways as well. Now, the reality, I believe, of the work of the MJF is going to be this part that I told you about. This is, we only do two things. We provide technical education for brewers and distillers, and we provide mentorship to go along with that technical education. That is the stated mission of the MJF. However, I have a feeling that that is actually going to be the 20% of the iceberg, so to speak, that is above the waterline. The rest of the work of the MJF, again, I suspect, is going to be the day-to-day work of connections, having an in, having somebody who is going to get you the email address and even an introduction so that you can even start the conversation about how to get a job. Because those resources are often lacking within our communities. We are going to build basically a resource center. And I don't want anyone who comes to the MJF to find that the MJF is in any way a roadblock or the end of their road, into brewing or distilling if they're serious. Not everyone who comes to us is going to be a fit for our direct program. But just because you did not win the scholarship award this year, that doesn't mean that you cannot win it in another year. And it also means that this is not the only thing probably that we're going to be able to do for you. So if not this, then what? as opposed to no, which is not really a useful answer for anybody. You know, no means the end of the line with us, and we don't intend to be the end of the line for anybody. You know, we intend to find a pathway for people, you know, who are willing to commit themselves, you know, to doing this work. And if the direct pathway that the MJF routes down is not the correct one, we will help you find another one. And that's going to be also a big part of the work. If people here want to know more, they want to contribute to our work, the website is themjf.org. .org, not .com, and the MJF. So THEMJF.org. And there you will see an FAQ, you'll see our mission statement, you'll see some links to articles where, you know, we get into this. But I hope that out of all this, you can look at your own tap room if you have one, or your own business, your own career, and understand that a lot of us, you know, we're not here to point blame at anybody. I managed to sit in the chair as brewmaster for 30 years and hire no black people. This was not something that I meant to do. I had to change my thinking in order to change my behavior. And the question that I asked myself is, instead of saying it's not my fault, ask yourself this: what if it was my fault? What if it was my fault? Maybe, what if I was the problem? How would I be the problem? And it turns out that if you are willing to look in the mirror, you are likely to find places in which you could have done something, but you didn't do anything. That is certainly the case with me. I could have done this years ago. There, you know, this fund, it's called the Michael James Jackson Foundation. By the way, for those of you who do not know who Michael Jackson was, and no, we are obviously not talking about the pop singer, though he did sell millions of records. Those records just simply happened to be books. So he was the progenitor, really, of the craft beer movement all over the world. He sold millions of books in 14 languages, probably in many ways the most important voice in food and drink in the 20th century. You may never have heard of him, but if you have heard of beer styles, or you are familiar with the Great American Beer Festival, or you know, you are, you know, in the whiskey business, you almost certainly have heard of him because his books are seminal, and they really set up the structure, if you like, for how we look, particularly at beer, not only in the United States, but around the world, how we talk about it, how we think about it, you know, everything. There probably would be no craft brewing movement, at least not one that looks the way that it does in the United States or elsewhere, if not for Michael's work. He was also very distinctly an anti-racist individual, you know, and my friend. And he took real action on this. Believe you me, when I was introduced to the folks in the judging room for the Great British Beer Festival in 1992, sitting there with 6 other people to choose Champion Beer of Britain, a very prestigious award, people wondered why there was an African-American in his 30s in the room where no black people had ever been seen before. And Michael, who was basically king of the writers, said, this guy knows more than you do. You know, he's a very good brewer in these styles, and he's going to make a great judge, and you should listen to him, where almost nobody else would stand for me. Sometimes this is what it takes, actual action on behalf of somebody, to stand up for somebody, to do something, you know, for somebody. And for most of us, frankly, we're very busy. We're very busy all the time. Before the pandemic, I was traveling to about a dozen countries a year. I was constantly on airplanes and airports and hotels. Finding the time to do something is difficult. But even if you're not traveling, think of it this way. If you have a list of 15 things to do today, how often do you get even to number 12 or number 14? And this is the problem. You may intend to do the work. You may intend on diversity and inclusion, but if you have 15 things to do today and diversity and inclusion is number 13, guess what? You are never going to get to number 13 on your list. So what is necessary to happen is to move it artificially, temporarily, but with intent, from being towards the bottom of your list of things to do to being at the top of your list of things to do. If diversity and inclusion were your number 3 task for today, you might actually do something. This is what I did. I decided that that doing something, in this area was important at this moment, and it was more important than almost every other thing. This was definitely influenced by the current social moment. I had helicopters hanging over my house every day here in Brooklyn, and it suddenly occurred to me that I had more time than I normally would. I had the ability to bring people to bear. I had the ability to go out and get the financing that's necessary, and that I could bring that to bear on behalf of people of color in the United States. And so this is what we are going to do. And our board is together. We are about to have our first board meetings. And by the end of the first quarter of this coming year, we expect to be able to announce our first awardees, and we'll be shepherding through their path through the brewing industry and hopefully on to even more successful careers. Now, I don't know all the various people who are watching, but if you have a craft beer bar, if you have a brewery, if you have a distributorship, you have to start somewhere in order to do anything, and it doesn't involve just, taking an online course or something that you tick off the boxes and say, now I know about diversity and inclusion. Let me give you something that I took, I'll perfectly admit, off the internet somewhere. I did not write this or say this, but it helps inform what I do every day in this area. So when it comes to trying to do something in the diversity and inclusion area, if a person of color can't eat it, spend it, use it to get a new job, use it to improve their living situation, use it to improve their pay, whatever you're doing, who are you doing it for? And the answer is, if no one can feel in these ways the thing that you are doing, the person you're doing it for is you. The important thing, in all of this is the effect. It doesn't matter really why you're doing, how you feel about it, whatever else. Are you having the effect? Did the thing happen which you intended? Your intent doesn't really matter in the end to the person of color that you may wish to help. And that is why the MJF is doing something very focused, very intentional, that essentially is guaranteed to work. And I say that advisedly, knowing that there are people watching. It's guaranteed to work. If people apply themselves to these courses and get their certifications, when they go out there, they will be hired. Because most people do want, any kind of person they can get who can actually do the job. And what we're looking to do is to put people in a position where they can do the job, and build on it. And so that is the entirety of what I have, to say to you today. If there is a method through this interface to put some questions up here, I am not seeing that on screen here at the moment, though I can look at, there's a chat function down here. And I am looking at, at the chat of Andrew Couplands, and it says, click the comments button and it'll show comments and questions. Okay, I have touched that button, and Thank you for the people who are saying some nice things. I appreciate that. I have one question. I'm originally from NYC and currently living in Colorado. My fiance and I are starting a Jamaican-inspired brewery with the mission to diversify the industry and share Jamaica's culture with the public. I think that's wonderful. I think there's there's stuff to be happening out of various backgrounds. So many flavors that you can bring that come from different cultural backgrounds into the brewing that you're doing. I mean, look at flavors like, say, sorrel, or all sorts of flavors that'll be very familiar in the Caribbean community, but not as familiar, in the broader community. You can certainly, make some stuff that's pretty straightforward, and you can also make some things that really bring Jamaica's culture, into the brewing industry. And what really is happening with all of this is not diversification of beer; it's re-diversification of beer, because people have always been brewing. It was always a thing that happened. Now, if you're looking to start a brewery and you're looking for people of color who have experience in brewing, etc., we also at the MJF will be a resource center in the other direction. So if you come to us and you say, we are looking for a person of color to be our brewer, within several months, hopefully we're going to be able to help connect you, to people. And if you're looking for somebody specifically Jamaican, well, hopefully eventually we can even help you with that. Though so far, the MJF, our courses will only be available to United States citizens and residents, but we hope that not too long from now, we'll be able to expand that, but not at first. There are people saying some nice things, which I definitely appreciate. And keep in mind, the diversity issue is not in any way, as I was saying earlier, endemic just to the brewing industry. I have talked to people at the top of the cocktail industry, at the top of the spirits industry, and they have told me directly, I'm talking about vice presidents from major companies, who are saying this is a real problem for us. And a thing to understand is that, once the brew houses and the distilling houses and the beer bars and the brew pubs, etc., the cocktail bars look like America, you are actually going to get the rest of the people that you're missing. I think all of us realize that about 40+% of the people in the United States are from some minority background. If you are leaving them out, you're basically leaving out 40% of your market. And when people start to work in your brewery who look more like the rest of America, guess what? They're going to bring their friends. They're going to bring their families. They're going to show up and be part of your culture and be part of your customer base. There are very, very good business reasons for wanting to have whatever it is that you're doing in front of all Americans, not just some Americans. You have brewers out there who are saying, "Hey, let's brew hard seltzer," something which nobody ever wanted to make, right? But they're like, "Well, there's a new market." Well, how about the market that you haven't even talked to yet? That's going to be a much easier and more fulfilling thing to reach, than to make maybe a product that you don't even have an interest in. Someone was asking, as a small business owner, I might not be able to donate ample funds to the MJF, but I would love to provide support. What can I do to help? Look, we're going to need all kinds of help. Everything from graphic design work, whatever it is that you have to do, we are probably going to need it. Also, through the MJF.org, we have taken in donations from $10 to $40,000. And I can tell you that, they both count. When someone puts $20 into the MJF, I know that when they put $20 in, that $20 was important. That person may have worked for an entire hour, maybe more, to make that $20, but they're giving it to us. That's an hour of somebody's time. We take that really, really seriously, which is one reason why we are trying to do something guaranteed to work and why we are so focused. I see somebody here saying that they're Mexican American. We are and looking to be able to cooperate with the foundation, and there will certainly be ways. We have looked to make sure that we have, Latinx, folks also, on our board, so that even though I have largely in this discussion talked about African Americans, I am broadly talking about people of color in the United States. And, if you are in a position where you have been seen somehow as different, then you are part of that group. And so, that will be part of the representation part going on our board, so that we make sure that, we're not going to be sitting here with quotas like we need, so many people of various backgrounds. We'll take, the best, the people who are most likely to do well and succeed through the program. But we're very much aware of making sure that the people that we're helping are not only of one background. I don't know if there's a way here to scroll any further comments, or there might be ones further down the screen here. I'm just kind of looking at our screen, but we are now in any event coming to the end of our time period here. We had 45 minutes to discuss. I hope that you find this useful. If you have further questions, you can reach out directly to me, Garrett @themjf.org. There are two R's and two T's in Garrett. And you can find me on Instagram at @iGarrettOliver. I'm not a difficult man to find. So hopefully, I hope this has given you some new ways to think, some new things that you could do. And it makes you sure that there is something that you can do, whether it is making a donation to us, and we hope that you will, or it is moving something within your own organization that broadens both your appeal to people and also the opportunity for people within your organizations. But trust me, there is something, there's two sides to it. Yes, there is a way in which non-diversity is your fault. Don't freak out. We're all in this together, all right? We all did this. It's not like, oh, these people did this, even I did it, as I told you. The point is to stop doing the same thing and expecting a different result, which is that classic definition of insanity, right? If you do the same thing that you have been doing, you will not get a different result. You need to actually do something. And so, I will encourage everybody today to do what you can, and trust me, you can do something. So thank you very much for your attention. And please do enjoy the rest of your conference, and thanks for having me.